how they can get involved. So is there anybody here, is this anybody's first Board of Selectmen meeting? Is this the first time you've ever been to a Board of Selectmen meeting? Yay! Well, thanks so much for coming out, that's awesome. We often talk about the power of an hour. If you can just give 1 hour of your time so that we can share with each other what is going on in each of our boards, it is super helpful. So you can look at the schedule and decide what nights are good for you and show up at that meeting. Typically, the meetings are on the same evening every week, so Mondays is typically the Board of Selectmen meeting. Tuesdays are, is Tuesday, what is, ethics? Yes, ethics committee. Wednesday is Conscom and school board?
ZBA.
Zoning.
And Cemetery Advisory Committee.
And Cemetery Advisory Committee. And then Thursday is
Planning.
planning, and is that school board?
Wednesdays is school board.
Wednesdays is school board, okay. So Thursdays is planning, and then that kind of rounds out the week. And there are some other meetings that happen here and there that are announced. So where we can find the meetings, you can always look on the town calendar. It will always be on there what the meetings are. A lot of times they will have agendas that are attached to them that will show you what they are going to be talking about at the meeting. So you can look through those and make sure that they are, if there's something that you're interested in, a lot of times that's a great place to find it. We have found that there have been a lot of situations where people have missed notices of when there's a planning board meeting and there's a property that the abutters have perhaps not been noticed. That's happened quite a few times. So the more people we have at the meetings, the better it is to kind of alert each other that things are coming up, and the more we know. Does anybody have any things that they have a question about, like what things you want to know about how the government runs or how our town politics work?
That works, I'm politics.
Just in general? Just in general. Well, so that's a really funny question. Yeah, because it's like drinking from a fire hose. I know when I first started paying attention, I guess I started coming to Board of Selectmen meetings, and then I joined the Budget Committee. What night does the Budget Committee meet? Is that Tuesdays?
Tuesdays and Thursdays during budget season. I'm
Yeah,
not sure what
so
the regular.
that's a really truncated season. So how it works is the Board of Selectmen are elected, they're kind of like the mayor, only they're a collective mayor. So there are 5 of them. And they make all the decisions for the town. Now, how it's supposed to work is that they make the decisions for the town and they direct our town manager to do the business that they have chosen or have decided on. Just so you know, it is, they should only be doing business here in front of the public. They should not be doing meetings in private in any circumstance. Well, so there are some circumstances that allow for a non-public meeting. So just like this one, they are speaking with the town attorney. There are certain circumstances where the information that they have may not be disclosed to the public, and sometimes they seal the minutes of those meetings. I have no idea what this meeting is about, so I can't speak to that, but things that would be an example would be like reputation. So if someone's reputation is going to be discussed, they would do that in a non-public session to ensure that there wasn't a case for libel, yeah. So things.
Personnel issues too, they sometimes, the city, town employees, there will be personnel issues.
Right, so those kind of issues, they would enter a non-public for. But honestly, non-public meetings should be pretty short. They shouldn't really be that long. They certainly shouldn't be the entire length of the meeting. There are very specific reasons that they should enter a non-public meeting. I know we had to do it a couple of times in the Budget Committee, but I want to say in the 3 years that I was on, we did maybe 3 non-public sessions. So Board of Selectmen's a little bit different because they have some different issues, but so that's kind of what a non-public meeting is. Everything else should be in public, and I will tell you that there are even RSAs that handle noticing when there is a quorum. So a quorum is In this instance, for like the Board of Selectmen, it would be anytime that 3 members are together of the 5. They have to actually notice that as a meeting. They are not allowed to meet together. So if they were out at dinner at the Tuckaway and all 3 of them showed up, they would have to actually discuss the fact that they had a quorum. A lot of times, people will actually leave and go to another restaurant just so they don't have to worry about the legality of that, because it's a meeting at that point. You can't be together talking about town business without calling the meeting, because the public deserves they have a right to know what goes on in all of the boards. So the Board of Selectmen is kind of like the mayor. They direct the town manager to do their business. All of those decisions, for the most part, should be made in public. As far as the other boards go, so planning board, Jim, can you talk about the planning board for us? Because you know a little bit about it. Actually, we have the chair, the new chair of the
And
planning
vice
board.
chair.
And the vice chair, yes. So Dee Lush, Dee, raise your hand and smile at everybody. Dee is the planning board chair, just got elected, and Jim is the vice chair this year. Take it away.
Well, for the most part, we have to hear applications that are put forth to the town's office. We currently don't have a town planner, which is impeding the actions of the planning board greatly, because the town planner that the voters voted on over a year ago still has not been hired. So this really needs to be tended to sooner than later. We do rely on the planner to go over the materials to make sure that applications are complete. They're not supposed to come before us until they have completed a full checklist. We do have an interim outside contracted person who is reviewing some of this stuff, but we're finding a lot of stuff is getting missed, unfortunately. So our main goal for the planning board is to preserve the natural elements of this town, your water, your infrastructure. Our oath is to make sure Raymond stays a safe and healthy place and not get overdeveloped. However, when applications are complete and landowners own land, they do have a constitutional right to develop their land. So obviously I do go through Facebook quite often. I don't comment, but I do like to see what the residents are talking about, and more often than not, we see, why did the planning board bring another Domino's, another pizza joint in town?
When are we getting the KFC?
We don't select businesses to come to town. That's not our job. It's quite the reverse. So we would hope that the town manager and a planner would go out and try to entertain good, light industry, the things that would be great for this town, that wouldn't impact our school systems, wouldn't impact, our infrastructure, and more importantly, our water. So it's a difficult job because, like I said, applicants have rights. But we will stand firm and make sure that they are complying with all of the regulations in this town. But I believe every application ultimately has been approved in the past year since I've been on the board, but we've made them conform. But we welcome the public. We don't see enough faces come to these meetings, and it is really important to voice your opinion, because we do listen to our residents. We do not close our public comment, ever. And under my watch, it will not be closed. I do expect respect from both members and the public, but just come, have your words to say, and do it in a pleasant manner, nice dialogue, and you'll be heard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You want to add to that?
Sure, just a couple of things. That was very well said, though. So there are other responsibilities of the planning board. One of them is doing the zoning amendments every year. And this year, the townspeople voted with us 100% on all 9 of them, and that was an amazing thing. And that was all in place to help protect the town. And I appreciate that very much for those of you that voted for it. Well, the other thing that falls under our responsibility is impact fees. And this is something that has been a matter of contention for a long time because they're very difficult to do. And, but we've wrapped our heads around them, and we had them ready to go, but we didn't have all the information that we needed to be able to do it last year. Same thing with growth management. Growth management are ordinances that are put in place to make sure that we don't get overdeveloped. So one of the things that we were working on last year that we couldn't pass was if your project was going to use more than 1,000 gallons of water a day, then we would not be able to accept your application. And so we didn't have the reports that we needed to be able to make that a legal thing. We do now, so that's one of the things that this board will be working on, is reasonable growth management for the town and get it on the books so that we're not fighting these battles, when the applications come to us. And there's more, but I wasn't really prepared to say
Yeah, there's a
anything
lot
tonight.
more. I mean, the town needs a master plan, there's the capital improvement projects. It's actually a very overwhelming position to hold, to be on the planning board because of, our last hearing, our packet was 683 pages long. That's a lot as volunteers. We all have full-time jobs. I'm a business owner. I also have jobs outside of my business, and then this in theory is pretty much a full-time job. Easter Sunday, Rainey, thank you for asking. I spent it doing planning board work. 100%. That's what we spend our free time doing. Again, just trying our best to do what's right for the town. I have no vested interest in any of the applicants that come before me. I live here, I drink the water here, my grandchildren live with us, they run in the grass, they go to these schools, so we are vested. I'm grateful for the history of the members that come forward, the residents that come and they've lived here for 30 years, 40 years. That's imperative. We need that history. But I think living here only just under 5 years doesn't make me any less qualified to love this town and to do what's right for the town. So, but when we do have they don't even have to be a work session, when we're not even hearing an application, we're doing board business, I think that's even more important for the public to come out, because we do want to hear what's important to you. And if I just ask for a show of hands right now, would you say water is the #1 priority in the town of Raymond? Raise your hand if you think that's true. Okay, so we have our mandate. That's what we're going to be sticking to.
Right. Question, do you know the preservation easements that the state is encouraging on older farms?
I'm not aware of.
That wouldn't really fall into our purview unless it was part of an application before the
Yeah,
board.
we don't deal with property in general until it's an application before us, to change a lot line or change the use
No,
of the property.
Just preservation easement on older buildings.
No, that would not come under us.
Can you speak to the difference between planning board and zoning board? Because I think a lot of people see those two and they don't know what the difference is between them.
Well, the zoning board is if you want to, the easiest example, of course, is to build a deck on your property. And, again, you've lived here, doesn't matter how long, but you see, the best place for the deck, or the only place I can build a deck, because maybe I have wetlands over here and stuff, and you want to build this deck, and the proper setback to your neighbor's yard is, we'll say, 25 feet. I don't know exactly, but depends on zoning and all of that. Everybody, there's zone A, B, C, commercial, all this. The best and really the only logistical place to build that deck, you need that relief of 5 feet, let's say. Just, geez, if I could just build it so it's 20 feet near you would go before the zoning board. You would just file an application. You have to pass 5 criteria. You must meet all of those criteria. And if you do, the board shall vote in your favor for a variance. And the variance stays with the property. So it's not like you'd sell that property, somebody has to tear down the deck. So that's one part of a variance. Most common, it's asking for relief of some restriction on your property.
It's 2 sets of rules. So one is the zoning ordinances, and you have to go to the zoning board of adjustment to get relief from that. And then the planning board has site plan regulations and subdivision regulations and excavation regulations and everything else. So everything else comes to us, but if it's a zoning issue, it goes to the ZBA, and if it's anything else, it comes to the planning board.
And Kathy, I think you've been heavily involved in CONSCOM, haven't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As a member.
Can you speak to CONSCOM and tell us what the CONSCOM does?
That's Conservation Commission.
I know, I didn't tell anybody that we were gonna do this, but I thought, well, if they're gonna go into non-public, rather than just sit here, we might as well talk to each other.
I'll tell you one thing, CONSCOM needs more volunteers.
Oh, missed
What we
opportunity.
do is, we're supposed to look at, if we get them, plans, any new, project that comes into town, and it has wetlands on it, or steep slope, zone G land. CONSCOM's supposed to be able to take a look at it, and then we can make comments, recommendations, but we're advisory only. And we check out the property, we usually try to do a site walk on the property and actually see it physically in person. And there might be things on the property that might not look like much to you all, but like vernal pools or stands of trees that are really unique and, you know, that really should be preserved. And maybe we could make comments of, gee, if you're gonna build this road, could you please leave this particular stand of trees alone, and, or maybe this particular vernal pool, could you go around it, if that, you know, makes any sense? Usually developers, a lot of them kinda like to flatten everything, and we don't like to see that. But we just give our opinions and present it to the planning board, you know, our recommendations. The planning board can take the recommendations or not. And we also are in charge of making sure that all the town properties, the conservation lands that we own, are being properly taken care of. Like, we had one issue where somebody was living on one of our conservation lands, you know, a homeless person, which you have to, it's like, oh boy, it breaks your heart that there's a homeless person living here, but on the other hand, it's the town property, and what if they get hurt, or they get killed, or, you know what I mean? You have to sometimes be the bad guy and say, I'm sorry, you can't live here anymore, and, you know, let the authorities come in. But we also keep track of all the conservation lands that we have in town and make sure that they're being properly utilized. We're always looking for more, of course, you know, more properties, because we actually have a new member who is a hunter, and we've been looking and looking for a long time to have a hunter on our conservation, in our conservation commission, because most of us are not hunters, so we actually, hunters and conservation are really work hand in hand, because if we don't have green space, if we don't have lakes and ponds that are clean, then you're not gonna have fishing and hunting. You won't have the fish, you won't have the deer, you won't have the bear. So we are actually working with the hunter this year, which is fantastic. And we can pick his brain and say, okay, you know, what about this? What about this? And we also have a new, something that we just put in last year, no baiting, which we didn't realize, you know, that was such a bad thing. Baiting of animals, it's kind of like, okay, you're gonna, shoot fish in a barrel? So if they bait in a certain spot, but it wasn't like, you know, okay, the deer are gonna come right here, and then you're just gonna be able to shoot them quickly. It was more a matter of, there's something going around with deer, that it's like a bacterial infection that spreads from breathing, and it can kill a whole herd. So if they're all in one spot, all eating this corn or whatever somebody's gonna put down to bait, then if one deer has it, it's a respiratory disease, then it can spread and kill the whole, you know, the whole herd. But I mean, it's a learning curve. I've learned a lot, I'm still learning.
I have a question. Because you're only advisory, can, let's say, a 17-year-old high school student be on the board?
I have no idea.
Can we research that?
Sure.
Because I think what a great junior or senior high school,
Yeah.
get involved early. You really should be involved in your town.
It would be awesome.
And if it's allowed, I think we have an untapped resource.
It would be awesome.
So is the CONSCOM all volunteer?
Absolutely.
No elected positions in the CONSCOM?
No, they're not elected. I believe we are all appointed.
Who appoints you?
A selectman, I believe.
Board of Selectmen, okay. So, so if somebody wanted to be on the CONSCOM, they would go in front of the CONSCOM, or
They would come see us and sit through 3 meetings, and then we would get our hook and we would hook you in.
Yes, there are applications at Town Hall to become a volunteer, and you can check off the board or boards you wish to participate in. And yes, the actual Board of Selectmen, you would come before them to be appointed.
I actually have 2 applications sitting right here, if anybody is interested in even just looking at it to see what the questions are.
Planning Board needs alternates.
But there are a bunch of committees now that are appointed by the Board of Selectmen. They're not all listed on here, of course, you have to go and, there's no org chart, but you have to go and look. I guess if you looked at the agenda tonight, you could kind of see some of those are listed within the committees that the board will have a designee to.
When they get to decide, they decide who
They appoint,
is
yeah.
on everything.
Right, and the requirement is 3 meetings. Unless it's a new committee, obviously, that hasn't had any meetings, then you're kind of exempt from having to attend 3 meetings, because there haven't been many since, but, yeah, if anybody wants a copy.
So just one thing about the Board of Selectmen, they make the appointments, but it's typically the boards that have made the recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, and I have never seen them deny someone. So if somebody comes to CONSCOM, yes, they're appointed by the Board of Selectmen, but if CONSCOM recommends them, it's pretty much a done deal.
Right. Do you know, I just had a question and I thought, oh, that's an important thing to ask. That was,
Well, one thing about all these boards is when they come back from the non-public session, it says Select Board Organization Committee Assignments. That's where each of the board members votes on which one of the board members from the Select Board is going to sit on each of these different boards as their representative. Sometimes it's called an ex officio, but it just means that they're the representative of the board, and they have the full membership of the board that they sit on, and then they are supposed to come back and report to the Board of Selectmen. So that's why this organizational chart, number 4 on the agenda tonight, is so important.
I do know what the question was. Dee, so you mentioned that the planning board needs an alternate. What are the duties of an alternate on the planning board?
The alternate should obviously come first, observe the meeting. Once they are appointed as an alternate, they get to sit with the board. They participate in the discussion. They get the same material, all the material for an application. The only thing an alternate cannot do is hold office or vote. So,
Until they're seated.
well, I was gonna follow up with that.
Sorry.
So if a member is absent for any reason, and we are a board of 7, the only seat you can't fill with an alternate is the selectman's rep. But any of the other 6 members, if they're absent for any reason, we have an alternate, the chairperson will seat that person, that alternate, for that meeting or meetings, and becomes a full voting member at that time. So it's imperative that's why it's very imperative for the alternates to attend all the meetings, to be ready to be called up. Sometimes it's a work-related thing or a travel, somebody expected their plane to land and be in time for a meeting, and they just can't be there. So it's always best to have a full board. You really want to have that good sound reasoning and everybody to be looking at these applications.
So I will say, I've been watching the planning board meetings, actually very recently as well, and it's super interesting. Things come up that you're like, I never even would have thought of that. So I think that anytime you attend any of these meetings, it's really interesting, the things that come up that you think to yourself, I've never even considered that, that's something that needs to be dealt with. So it's a really fun learning experience, and it's a great way to kind of get introduced to the different things in our town that kind of need some attention. So as far as what other things can we talk about as far as how government works? We can talk about the fact that we pass a budget. That budget is then considered a bottom line budget. So the budget for the town and the school, once it is passed, they, with some restriction, they can kind of spend it on whatever they choose to spend it on. There are some funds that is not the case, that some funds that are designated for specific things, that they must spend those funds on those specific things. And some of them are even have times attached to them in order to expend those funds. But for the most part, it is a bottom line budget. So that is something that is a little bit tricky. So as a town, we get in revenue. The revenue comes from lots of different places. It comes from property taxes. It comes from car plates and dog tags and hopefully impact fees in the future. So we get that from lots of different places. So the revenue of the town, it also comes from the state. There are portions that come back from the state to help fund the town. All of that revenue goes into kind of a bucket we spend throughout the year, and then at the end of the year, what happens to all of that money is that it kind of goes into another fund called the unassigned fund balance, or the unassigned fund. So it's an unassigned fund that just kind of holds that money that is left over. Now, at the end of the year, there are different things that the Board of Selectmen can actually choose to do with that. So at the end of the year, they can go ahead and take a portion of that money that's left over and actually give it back to you. So when they have collected all of your property taxes, at the end of the year, if there's this, lots more people bought cars than had in previous years, and they have an abundance left over, they can actually take a portion of that and use it for tax relief, so that they can reduce the next year's budget and taxes for the taxpayer. There is a state requirement, is probably not the right word. I don't know that the state actually requires us to hold any funds.
Yes.
Yes.
They do,
There's-
is it 5%?
Percentage.
It's lower than that. It's about 2.5%.
Is it?
And then the maximum is about 17%, and we're close to that now.
I think
Yeah.
we're about 15%.
We're about 15.
It's in that range.
Yep, so I know several years ago, that was very, very low, and for years there was quite an excess every year, and it was built up quite a bit. So when you see on the ballot things that say no tax dollars to be expended, that's typically, not always, but a lot of times, that's because.
It's not on.
Okay.
I just don't want to put on.
Oh,
It's got feedback, that's all.
feedback.
It's,
yeah.
Feedback is off.
Yeah, it's.
turn it down.
The.
P&O, there's a lot of feedback.
A lot of times the funds that are not expended are used to lessen the impact of those things. So as an example, a few years ago, the employees for the town, the way that the contracts were written was that the vacation that they had, and maybe personal time too, would just continue to add up. So after a lot of years of that, they realized that if somebody was going to retire, they had built up years of vacation or sick time or whatever that they had, that the town would be responsible for a large chunk of money that would leave with them when they retired. And so to mitigate the impact of that for our taxpayers, one of the things that they decided to do was to start a fund that they would fund a little bit every year, like a savings account, so that when somebody that retired out of the town government who had one of those large nest eggs built, it would come from that fund so as to not impact the town. so we wouldn't have big tax hikes from it. And we decided to take that from the unassigned fund balance. It actually took us quite a bit of time to figure out that we could do that. But we started taking the money from the unassigned fund balance and putting it into that fund so that we could make sure that those were funded without a new tax impact, because the taxpayers had already done the heavy lifting. Okay. So that's one of the things that we can do. So with it being at 17%, we do have the ability to ask the Board of Selectmen to, you know, take that and lessen the impacts of taxes next year, or something else if we choose.
Have they ever done that?
Have they ever done that?
Yes, about 2 to 3 years ago, Lee
Yep.
Weldy, I believe, made the motion and it went on.
I agree, yeah, it was, I believe that may have been the only time that we've seen that happen. I don't ever remember that.
Like, we've only been here about 5 years.
Yeah,
so
I don't ever remember, and before that, it was, super low.
But
Hey,
it is
Virginia.
imperative also
Hey,
to
Tina.
have a good balance, because you don't want to, you know, your town to go bankrupt.
Yeah, well, and not
And this
only
is-
that, but like a couple of years ago, I don't know if you remember, but there was a beaver dam that broke, that we had to repair culverts, and there was a lot of work that needed to be done on that on the beaver dam break. And so, there are situations like that that are gonna come up, that it's good to have a backdrop that, I mean, you can go to the state would never let us drown. The state would be happy to lend us money if we needed to. But it's smart to have a good basis of something that we can fall back on as a town. That we've done the heavy lifting, we've got a nice little nest egg that, you know, we can keep. So I think it's good to, I like that to stay around 14%. That's usually what I used to try, and when I was on the budget committee, that seemed to be a good, because it was enough that it allowed us to have the ability to give back to the taxpayers if we wanted to. That seemed to be about the right balance.
I have one more question. Do we have a DPW, a head of DPW yet?
Not yet.
No, we don't. So,
Do we keep voting? I feel like every time I go vote, I vote for road construction, but I never get any, you know what I mean? The roads never get fixed.
yeah, so there was a plan in place. Last year, they were virtually untouched. It's not that we didn't raise the taxes, we did.
So where did all that money go when we
It's-
had to vote for more money this year?
Right, so it's actually still there. So it will, the money that we voted for this year, hopefully, the shame of that is that we actually had contracts that we had created with companies that were great deals, that we kind of lost out on because they didn't take the initiative to get those done. So, yeah, that's something that's terribly important. If we have the money, go ahead and a lot of those funds, if we don't use it in a certain amount of time, it doesn't stay in that fund.
Right.
So you
Well,
do
that was my
have to,
question. Does that go to the overflow fund if they didn't use it?
yeah, it does. It'll go back to the unassigned fund balance, I believe, is how that works. So, yeah, it's imperative that they, and there are definitely solutions to that. I would love to see them, the planner, that's a huge one. You know, the entire thing is, a planner, you're talking, what is the salary on a planner, between 85 and 130?
Depending on the experience level, yes.
So last year, Rockingham County, Rockingham County has planners that you can contract to fill that position if you need them to. Last year, we spent $185,000, I think, through Rockingham County to get the planning stuff handled. It's a terrible use of tax dollars to allow.
And it's only part-time.
Part-time.
Right.
The planner that, the acting planner that we have in place now is a part-time, shared with other communities. So she's not dedicated, she's not focused on Raymond, she's not familiar with just Raymond. She's having to cover several communities. So we really need someone who is Raymond focused, you know, able to get in and able to collaborate with the different land use boards and the town and the Board of Selectmen and get us on the right track.
Yeah, absolutely. And a planner, yeah, go
The
ahead.
problem with this is finding a quality person to fill the position, and that's where they have the problem, I believe, in my experience anyway.
So actually, there've been several applications that have come in. I just talked to a friend of mine up in Milton. She is the chair of the board up there. And she said that, actually, that is where Ernie came from. He was up there as the town manager up there. And so I called her and talked to her a good bit. She said that they hired a student out of UNH that was phenomenal. And I thought, man, what a great idea is that? So that is absolutely, and they are not terribly expensive because they need the experience. So, and they're super dedicated. They're trying to prove themselves. So, yeah, that's a great way to go to look into a student that's just graduating that can take that position. So there's definitely places that we can go to fill that position that would be dedicated and understand, you know, who our town is and what it is that we're looking for and how we live our lives in our town.
Is there like an assigned person that's, or is it just a job, it's just advertised out there, or is it somebody that actively is looking for someone?
So again, it's the
I
town
don't know how it
manager is
works.
the one who is supposed to be hiring the positions, but he has to be directed to do it by the Board of Selectmen. So anything that the town manager does, he should be doing under the direction of the select board. There should be almost nothing that the town manager does without the direction of the select board. And if there is, then the select board either needs to direct him differently or allow them to understand that, you know, they,
Work for them?
yeah, what their parameters are. So it's an interesting relationship. They do have, you know, the ability to run the office, but any decision that's made should go through the select board.
I'm gonna say the select board overrules
Everything.
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 Thank goodness in some ways, because, last April, I applied for the preservation easement of a 150-year-old barn, and I'm still going to meetings here to find out the answer, because even though RSA said, in particular,
Yep.
it says, preservation easement is definition is preservation of historic agricultural structures, including the land necessary for the function of the building. I am still waiting to hear if they'll give me the ramp. They said, oh, you don't need a ramp, it's not listed in the, I received your request, that was last April. Again, I had to do it, what, 4 meetings
They
ago?
don't do their homework.
Yeah, there's no provision in the barn easement statute that provides for the inclusion of ramps. So they're giving me, I'm hoping the selectmen will say, common sense says, you can't get to the rent into a barn without going up a ramp. But our town assessor and Bill, what else is his title, said it's not necessary. So I don't need a
Just
ramp
because
to
it's
go in
not
the barn.
mandatory, doesn't mean it's not necessary.
Here I am, RSA, here's the ramp, here's
Yep.
pictures, on
We're
and
on
on.
How many times have we been here?
This is gonna be probably our seventh meeting.
Okay, this is probably my sixth going on this, from last April. This is a year. According to the RSA, they're supposed to make.
We're in for 2 years now, trying to get, just not be
Just to be
ignored.
heard.
Not be ignored.
Yeah. It's, considering the RSA says, I didn't bring that part of it today, that this is supposed to be finished in 90 days. Here I am,
A year plus later.
almost.
There's no
Yeah.
chance we're gonna get a
A
chance
year.
to speak.
I applied April 15th for this.
Yeah.
So, and thank goodness the select board listens, rather than our tax assessor, rather than our assessor. I shouldn't say names, so I won't say it out loud, but, he has used different, the first meeting, they had decided that the, department was wrong, and he made his own division as far as how much I could save on my barn. The Department of Revenue Service said, never heard of such a thing.
Right.
Okay, so they gave me a whole bunch of papers I could keep here, they changed it from the selectmen, thank goodness the selectmen changed it. Then they said I had a basement in my barn,
So I had to come with more photos to show there's no full basement, it's just land underneath the barn that's level. That changed every step of the way, thank goodness for the selectmen. Because I don't know why, I don't know why our town assessor chooses differently.
Can I make a point about something? It's not related to that. I'm sorry.
That's why I asked the planning board.
Not everybody, but a large percentage of the people here raised their hand when they were asked if the most important thing to you at this point is about our water situation. So wells, contamination, storage, distribution. And I had asked the town manager and the Board of Selectmen to put water tanks and the brownfield site over at the Rex Tannery on tonight's agenda, because they haven't met for over a month. And a lot has happened. And these things need to be discussed. And it's not on the agenda. It is not on the agenda. So the priorities of the people are not represented by the priorities of the Board of Selectmen that put together this agenda. I just wanted to point that out because I probably won't get an opportunity to speak at length on it tonight either. And that's a shame.
And if I may, if you go on the town website, and most of you hopefully have been there, they are supposedly revamping it. It's outdated and it's hard to navigate sometimes, but it is pretty easy to find each board. And then when you click on the select board and the staff, they each have a government email.
The selectmen didn't until last year.
No, the selectmen
They
have
were all
one.
using their private emails.
They have emails. I strongly suggest you all utilize those emails. Your selectmen are voted by you, by us, okay? The majority of this town put them in those seats. And if water is our number one priority, I'm not saying roads are obviously there too. Put your thoughts into those emails and then show up. And like Jim said, ask for it to be on the agenda, ask to be heard. Go ahead.
Isn't there a, one committee that was supposed to be tracking the slug of products in the water from the tannery site? That was supposed to be monitored from years ago.
It's being monitored. We actually, Jim and I are on the
Yeah.
water
Are they
committee.
building on that now? Are they talking
And
about building on that?
The DES is heavily involved with that site, but they put a letter out to the select board last July, I believe, with a due date of September 1st for an independent study, and it still has not been responded to.
And there's new letter that came out on March 6th that had a 30-day window that, because we haven't had any public comment or ability to get answers from the town manager, we don't know if that has now in violation as well. So that's one of the reasons why you'll see me at every one of these Board of Selectmen meetings, is because as the chair of the Water Planning Committee, I'm trying to get the information so that I can share it with the planning board and make it public for everyone.
Well, I have one more question. So do we have enough water for this, what are they building, 60 apartments or something on Chester Road?
So I would direct you,
That gives me planning.
I would direct you to a letter that has been made public from Underwood Engineers that was given to the planning board as a tool for us to plan. And what that letter says is that there is not enough water for the new development that's here now. Our system cannot handle it. And we knew this long before we needed any engineers to write it in a letter and tell us. And we know lots of other things that we could act on that we're not allowed to, because we can't motivate the town manager and the board to be able to get us the information in order to address them.
We want it.
We've known since 2016. when
Yeah,
the first study came out.
2016, the first study came
And
out.
I did an article on Raymond Rights, if you want to see that letter, it is up there, it's easy to find, raymondrights.com. the most recent post, I think, is the last one I put up was before the election about this water situation, and that particular letter that states, with the developments that we've already approved, we are in dire straits of even providing water.
But how does it get approved? That's what you're
Because we are
probably- I don't know,
bound-
but how does this stuff get
Can-
approved if, like, I feel like some of these boards don't do their homework before they just,
I can quote from this letter.
how do they? I mean, if you don't have the water to.
How do permits come?
Right.
So for a long time, we couldn't get the letter. We couldn't get them to give us the study that said that we didn't have the water. They would always, when we would point to the 2016 study, they would always say, oh, it's too old, we can't use that,
We need
that's not
expert,
right.
we need expert reports
And they can't.
as a
hire
finding
another
of fact on
another study?
decisions. So if we deny an application, we just say, well, we don't have enough water. Again, applicants have
No,
constitutional
I
rights.
understand that.
There
What I'm
has to
saying
be,
is, can't the board, can't you?
no, I'm
they don't
explaining
do
that to you.
another
I
study?
cannot,
Like,
they
you
have a
guys
window
can't
of,
order a study, or?
I'm trying to respond. We have a window of time to hear an application.
Mm-hmm.
Again, they have rights. We're doing the best we can, but when you have a town manager who's failing to respond to known contamination in the town, water shortages, I can't say for this current board, the previous select board, was non-existent in responding to the government, to the water committee, to the planning board, trying to get what we needed to stop these overdevelopments. We don't want to pass these, but without the requirements under the law, they will go to court and the judge will say, the planning board is wrong. They cannot deny you based on the feeling that there isn't enough water.
So,
So you can't order if that's what I'm asking. So if somebody comes and says, I wanna put 100 condos in Raymond, and you can't order a study?
We can't do
I,
anything.
I can answer this
I'm
question.
gonna let Jim answer
Yeah.
this.
I'm just
Okay,
trying to-
so in response to that, there isn't a study that we can, as a planning board, request. That study has to go through the Board of Selectmen, because they're the ones that expend the funds. So we can recommend that they do a study on something which we have done. And if I may, one of the things that has been coming up is this, whether we have enough water or not. And if I can have just a minute, I'll read this from the letter from our engineers that we received from the planning board.
What date, please?
The date?
Yeah.
This is February, thank you so much. This is February 23rd is when this letter of this year, 2023. Consistent with NHDES criteria, a municipal groundwater system shall be able to provide adequate supply as follows. Now, there's two criteria here. The first one is meet maximum day demand with all sources in service. And their estimation was that current demands can be met. Future demands with all 8 developments cannot be met. So what we have for our infrastructure now is enough to handle what we have right now for us. Anything beyond that, new development, we do not have the water for it. The other criteria is that you must meet the average day demand with the largest source out of service. Our largest source of water, for the purposes of this, is our water treatment plant. So if you took the water treatment plant out of the equation, it needs to meet this criteria. And the current demands cannot be met if the water treatment plant is out of service. That means that our current system is in violation of this criteria. And future demands, obviously, with 8 developments, cannot be met.
So one of the things that has to be understood with that is, because a lot of times we hear people say, well, make them drill a well. So the challenge with that, though, is that we all have the same aquifer. The aquifer that we all draw from is sitting underneath our entire town. And even other towns have the same aquifer, share the same aquifer. So we all have a straw into the same glass. So even though because we don't have enough water, it's not to say that you can just come up with it. It all draws off that same aquifer. So until we find a new source or there's something else that changes, that water study is paramount to what the planning board needs to
And
do
it's why
do
that
the
it's
job that we want them to do.
so critical that we keep an eye on the PFAS contamination, that everybody is aware and as much of contemporaneous at the same time that the town manager and the board are aware of these issues, that the people are also aware of these issues. Because if our aquifers get contaminated, it's all over. We are
So-
drinking bottled water.
Yeah, well, and that's actually happened to Plastow, wasn't it? They're still in quite the pickle. But that also, I don't know if anyone knows, but tonight, I'm super sad that they made the meeting tonight, because there is also a meeting going on right now about the Pawtuckaway State Park. I don't know if you know, but they're looking at adding 85, is it 85 sites?
No.
85 sites? So they're looking at adding 85 new sites at the Pawtuckaway that are electric and water. And so those sites, we didn't really get noticed on this, but honestly, one of our select board should be at that meeting representing our town.
Right
and
now.
our interests,
Right now.
because our police officers respond, our fire department responds, our roads are impacted by the traffic that comes through there. And so 85 is double what it currently is. So rather than have this, like, schedule this meeting for tomorrow or another night,
They do that.
we should have somebody there representing us saying, if you're gonna build those 85, then Raymond needs to know that we have some input that our taxpayers aren't just gonna have to keep throwing in money for new firefighters, for more police, for more cruisers, more road money. We shouldn't be operating like that.
Can I say something real quick that isn't specific to this, but just generally about meetings? What we're discussing right now, this open communication, is what we should be doing with the Board of
They
Selectmen.
don't let you.
Instead,
More constructive
One
than
second.
it was like the
in,
minute.
instead, we get 15 minutes, and each person gets 3 minutes out of that 15 minutes, and of course, people run over.
And also you have to be approved to speak.
And you need permission from the chairman to speak as well. There is no planning board meeting this Thursday. There typically is, but this Thursday there isn't one. So if anybody gets an opportunity to speak to this board, will you please ask them, will you schedule a meeting for Thursday to speak with the public on all of the topics that we're talking about? Or maybe just an open session with the people so that you can hear us and we don't have to try and box important issues into 3 minutes.
That's a
That's a
great
great
idea, Jan.
suggestion.
And the
Thank you.
agenda for tonight's meeting has nothing in regards to the water tower issue. That was such a hot topic and a pertinent push to get that Article 10 through, which, if anybody isn't aware, Article 10 did fail. It did not meet the majority of the vote that it required. So Article 44 has passed. The funds, part of the funds of the grant, the application has to be resubmitted with a plan the end of this month.
Yeah, May 1st.
May 1st is the deadline, and there's
That's
absolutely no way to make it at this
$880,000
point. There's no legal way for us to
that
make
we're
it.
now losing, and in addition to thousands and thousands and thousands that we've already lost in this whole, because this has been before us since I remember the first meeting that DES came in 2019 and alerted the Board of Selectmen that you have a problem you need to start planning for. Here we are today, 4 years later.
Yep. And the other part of that is that it won't get taken care of by developers. It'll get taken care of by the taxpayers. It'll be on our backs to fund whatever it is that we're gonna need to fund.
But they're not making an effort to try to offset the costs that we're going to end up picking up.
Yep.
By even discussing it, it's not even on the agenda tonight, so I don't expect that they're going to have any information or any opportunity to discuss it at all. And that should have been number one on the agenda.
And there's
In my opinion.
there's nuances, so that's 98% correct, and what I said is probably 98% correct, but there's nuances to this that need to be discussed, and we can't even get the simplest answers. The application that was approved, that we would have to resubmit, I've been trying to get a copy of that application so I can see what they actually got approved, and I can't get it.
Yeah, that is the other thing that we definitely want to, our presence here will facilitate, hopefully, the ability to get the information requested out. Everything should be in the light. There is absolutely no reason that we shouldn't be able to get to the information that we have as a town, that we need to have as a town. I know that here, there is a definite, track record of having to submit to the town for information and then not getting it back. And it looks like they're back. So if you're interested in being part of the crew.
I have a comment. I'm here as a member of the public, I'm not here as a council member. I just want to get that out there.